welcome. I thought I'd close out the year with another DCC Adventure tier list, just like last year. Just a few things before we get into it, though. I did delist last year's one because I did it when I was really sick, and I didn't have a lot of content out, and I kind of just put it out there. And, of course, whatever you put something out there that doesn't actually have that much effort in it, of course, that's the one that goes out to everybody. So I delisted it because I don't think it's a very good representation of my channel, but I also don't like just fully deleting things and pretending like things aren't there. So you can still access it through the link in the description. Honestly, it's going to become obsolete because what we're going to do today is I'm going to go over the ones that I recovered last year, see if anything's changed, if I feel about them a little bit differently, and then we'll get on to the new ones. And as a reminder, this is for adventures only made for DCC. It's not everything I've run with DCC. If it was, it would be quite a bit longer. But this is just stuff that was made for DCC, except for one, which I'll get into later. There's one here that's made for MCC, but I ran it using DCC, so I'm counting anyway because there's no way in hell I will ever run enough MCC to ever do a whole MCC tier list because I don't like MCC that much. It's okay. It's fine. I'd rather just run MCC stuff with DCC, though, instead of having to learn MCC. But that is a whole other tangent already. So, yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because I will say I did not realize that I had only run 8 different adventures made for DCC this last year. I've run a shitload of DCC, but I did not realize that how much of it was for just either for homebrew stuff or just random OSR adventures that were made for other OSR systems or OSR adjacent systems. But yeah, let's just get into the tier list. So we'll start with C and then we'll work our way up to S. So the first one here is Forgotten Rites of the Moldering Dead. There is an adventure in the back. I ran the funnel in the back of it, which I am already forgetting the name of what it was called in there. But this book does come with 2 adventures and also comes with a bunch of stuff on Undead. I did mean to make a video for this for Halloween like 2 or 3 years now, but I just never got around to it. And I really should do one soon, I think, because the DCC Dungeons Denizens, whatever the big monster book that's being made by DCC that's coming out, will probably, I don't want to say make this obsolete, because I don't think that's a good way to look at most RPG books. I think there's always stuff to glean from a lot of different ones, but sometimes things will become less useful. But I do think that this book should get a lot of credit for a pretty long time, several years, being one of the only places where you could actually get stat blocks for like vampires and a few other things for DCC. Like this is the best thing to recommend people. It's like, hey, I want some more undead for different games. What should I get? This is the book to go with. And I feel like if I leave this just in C, because I think the funnel itself that I'm actually reviewing, or I guess ranking, is a C, is not great, but I do feel like if I leave it here in C, a lot of people will be like, oh, that book itself, they just see the cover, they're gonna be like, oh, the book itself is just a C, I'm not gonna go for it. The funnel itself is fine. Yeah, you kind of go into this like ancient, kind of like primordial pocket dimension thing. I won't get too much into spoilers for these. If I do get into spoilers, I will put up a spoiler warning and give you the time code for when you can go to non-spoilers. I'm also gonna break this up into chapters, so it shouldn't be too hard for you to avoid spoilers, but I won't go too deeply into this one. But the funnel itself is fine. It didn't blow my mind. It didn't change the way I view funnels, but it was pretty decent. But I think because the book as a whole is absolutely worth as a purchase, and I think deserves credit before, I guess, nobody talks about it again once we get a whole book full of monsters from Goodman Games, I'm gonna put it into C+, just so that it gets a little bit more recognition. Next we have Against the Atomic Overlord, and I have very mixed feelings about this one. I think it's going to stay in C, honestly. I think this has a lot of cool stuff. I think this would work really well as an MCC adventure. I think it does the really great thing that you can do with DCC, which is completely shift genres and go straight into apocalypse. I think it works really well for that. There's a lot of awesome stuff about it. Like, I don't know if there's anything I'm going to review here that's going to be D, because I think I said this in the last year's tier list. If I read something and think it's not very good, I have a very limited amount of time to run things I like and run things I want to talk about. And I also don't really enjoy, as much as I know it's the YouTube thing that you're supposed to do a lot of negative reviews to actually get traction, I don't really enjoy that. I don't enjoy, especially when it comes to RPGs, just tearing like singular authors through the mud. I will sometimes get like a little bit snarky, but overall, I don't like doing that stuff. So this is probably the lowest tier, honestly, because this one had a lot of really confusing layouts. It really needs a reprinting, and I don't know if since then, because I've not looked into it at all, I don't know if this has gone to reprinting that's been better, but there were way too many maps. I went over this in the Pile of Shame review episode, where I reviewed every adventure I did in the Pile of Shame campaign, and I also ran this one for the actual play. So if you do want to see this one in play, you can. I think it took us 2 sessions. I believe this was the ending to the Pile of Shame campaign season 1, and then I also reviewed it in greater detail, so I'll put those up in the little top right corner there for you guys to click on. But yeah, I'm gonna stay and see. It's a really fun idea, a lot of really great stuff. I think it actually could be a B, but until those things are fixed, which again, I don't know if they have or not, so go check to see if there's been a new printing that might fix those things. But the one I have has too many issues to put it above C, unfortunately. All right, so next we're gonna go to B, and we'll start with People of the Pit, and I think People of the Pit is gonna stay in B. I think People of the Pit's pretty good. I think it's a very solid adventure. I think it's a great one to play if you're into DCC. People of the Pit is like one of the first ones of like the new generation of like, I think it's like, cause I think it was written by Joseph Goodman. I think it came out in 2012, maybe 2013. It's a really early on. It's a very classic one. It's obviously not like the really early ones that they had when they were doing stuff for 3.5 in the early 2000s. But in terms of like the new generation, I think this is a pretty good one to look at to see how it inspired a lot of other adventures. It's a very classic one. This isn't really spoilers. You can tell by the cover and the name, the People of the Pit, that this is like a classic going against a cult, and this is like a big, you know, tentacle cult kind of thing. It does seem, at least to me, take some inspiration from video games, whether on purpose or not, because, and this isn't really spoilers, but there's like different levels to the cult that you'll deal with, and they have different powers and different strengths and that sort of stuff. So it's pretty cool, but I think this is like a really good classic adventure. I would love to do a review on this at some point, because I don't want to call it generic, because it's not generic, but like it's iconic, I guess, where it's just such a classic adventure. It's so tight, there's not much fat in it. It is a little bit long, but I don't think it's a problem if you're running it for a bigger campaign. But if you try and run things in one shots like I do with a lot of the DCC adventures, it could be a little bit long for that, but I think it is a load of fun. All right, next we're going to do Emirikol Was Framed. This is a really fun one, and very much like People of the Pit, I think this is a great one to do. If you need a wizard tower, if you have a city and you will need a wizard tower for it, grab this one. I also reviewed this because I also ran this for the Pile of Shame campaign. So I have played this as an AP, so if you want to go see my group play it, you can. And also I reviewed it in that same Pile of Shame video I did the Atomic Overlord on. I will point out all the ones I've reviewed in case you do want a deeper look. This is all pretty, you know, surface level stuff. We're not going to go too deep on these. But yeah, Emirikol Was Framed. I'm actually going to give it a B+, I think. I'm going to move it up because I think this is a really solid adventure. There's so much creative stuff in it, but even if you don't use it wholesale, I do think taking stuff from it for your own wizard tower, giving yourself some ideas for what wizards might have or some cool rooms to put in, it's just a fantastic resource to steal from. And plus, you know, it's got fucking winged monkeys, so you know I'm gonna like it. But yeah, I think B+ is pretty fair to that one. I definitely recommend grabbing this one. All right, so next we're gonna do Jewels of the Carnifex, which again is another one I did on the Pile of Shame, so you can see me run my group through it, and you can also see me review it. I have mixed feelings on this one. I like it. I think it has a lot of fun stuff. I definitely do recommend it, but I'm struggling to think if I might put this in a C+. I think this goes too far into the mean for mean's sake. As I've played more stuff, I have found that to be less interesting to me. It's not something I really enjoy. And I think a lot of that is because of a lot of the players I play with. And it's not like, oh, people come from the mainstream hobbies, they don't want to die, whatever else. That is such bullshit. People love dying. It's really, people love dying. That's my quote for 2023. But people in games do love dying, but they enjoy actual meaningful deaths. But I think this falls into this weird thing where when I ran it, my players, I could tell from how brutally mean it was in a random way, was not really fun. And for me, I don't actually think that captures necessarily that old school thing people talk about. I do need to make a video at some point on this like mythical era that people talk about, that there's like this nostalgia for this era that never actually existed. A lot of that brutality was still a level of like, you know, a puzzle you have to figure out. You don't just, you know, drop 10 whites on somebody. You have a room full of 10 whites and you have to decide if you're going to go through it or you're going to go around it, what you do with it. And this one has a few too many. You do a thing, a horrible thing happens. or, you know, a horrible thing happens, then 2 more horrible things happen for not much reward and not much rhyme or reason. And I know it sounds like I don't like this one. I do like it. I just think that it's the side of DCC and it's the side of a lot of RPGs that I have found less interesting. I love lethality. I love killing people. Oh my god. These are really bad quotes. These are terrible. I love killing characters in these games and all that sort of stuff. It's just that I prefer endings to stories. I prefer fun ways to die. I think funnels are perfect for that sort of real beer and pretzels, whatever, people are gonna die, that's all it is, because you're not really that attached to your characters, or you get overly attached. That's what makes it funnier, is that you have these people who are against the odds are just gonna absolutely get totally fucking dusted. And I do like that, but for once you get to 3rd level characters and you've had characters for a bit, I know in Pile of Shame we didn't really have them for that long, but for people who normally would get here and have 3rd level characters that probably took them a while to get there, just randomly dying, I don't know, I can see a lot of upset players, and I just don't know how much value that has in my game. It might have value in yours if you do like that. I'll probably touch on that more in Crypt of the Devil Lich when I get to that one. But I think I'm gonna have to give this one a C+. I think I talked about this one long enough, but I'm gonna give it a C+. I think it's fun, but playing it, I had some pretty upset players in a way that wasn't like, you fucking got me, but more like, Jesus fucking Christ. All right, I guess we'll go to the next room and see what absolutely destroys us there. Was sort of the vibe I got. And not that they need a shout out from me, but the Between Two Karens podcast did do an episode on Jewels the Carnifex. I think by the time this video is out, it might be the last episode that came out or the one before it. But either way, I do really recommend that podcast. I do think if you like my stuff, you like their stuff. It's, I wouldn't say similar content, but just that if you like, I guess, more lighthearted discussion of TTRPGs and not dry, super formal, super serious stuff, while still having, you know, something to say, I think you should absolutely check out that podcast. I doubt there's anybody who's listening to me who hasn't already heard of them, but if you haven't, I think you'll really enjoy it on your, you know, drives to work or whatever you do. But anyway, let's move on to the next one. All right, I'm not gonna spend too much time on this one. Crepuscular. Really solid little funnel. I do think I'm going to bump it down to a C+, though, because I do think it's too long for a funnel. I have noticed a, you know, greater length in funnels. I like short funnels. I like them to be done in one session. That is a personal thing. I don't think you're inherently a bad funnel just because you're more than one session long. I just like single session funnels. I don't really want them to carry on for too long. But yeah, it's going to get bumped down to a C+. It's really fun. I do recommend running it. If you have any kids, I think they'd enjoy this one. You know, the zany cartoon art and a lot of the sort of fun encounters. Some of them are a little bit dark, whatever, but I think you could really reflavor this completely to be more like a Saturday morning cartoon. So I recommend it. I'm putting down C+ just because I think it's a bit too long, and I don't know if it's like, you know, necessarily one of the better funnels I've played here. So, all right, next up is Yddgrrl's Maze. This appears in the back of the core book. It's not in all the printings, however. I have this only in my 5th printing one that I have. I'm not sure how many editions it's in, but it's in the back of the core book, and it might also be able to be found in one of the back of the paid adventures. I'll look into it and add to the screen if I do find it. But for now, all I know is that's in the 5th edition. It's in the 5th printing. It's not in 5th edition. It's in the 5th printing of the DCC core book, and it might be in some other printings. And the reason why I'm wondering if it might be in any of the other adventures is that I noticed, I believe in my Blades Against Death book, that the sort of bonus adventure that they often have in a lot of their adventures, the Abbot in the Woods, which was the first level of adventure to be back in the core book, was in the back of that one. So I don't know if they've also taken this one and put it somewhere. So if you missed out on that printings, I think we're at like, what, 8th or 9th printing, maybe 10th? We're several printings past that where it's no longer in the back of the book. You might still be able to get somewhere. Even be able to get the old PDF for the 5th printing if you really do want this one. This one is going to go down. But this one's going to be our first one to go down 2 levels. This one's going down to C. I have had a bit of a change of heart when it comes to this one. I don't hate it. I know I put down a full letter score. I just don't think it's that great. I don't know how to put this. I had a lot of fun with this because I ran this in a Planescape game, because I've run a lot of like DCC Planescape games, just these RAM homebrew ones. This is one times I actually used like an actual adventure, and this was like in the Beastlands. And we had a crazy thing where I was making any sort of animal or nature-based magic enhanced. You know, I think it was a die up on the chain, and some crazy shit happened with somebody summoning, you know, like 100 hit dice of lions as like the final encounter, ripping it apart. And I also ran another time where somebody turned into a giant and traversed across half the map and basically went to the end. So both times I had the ending boss just absolutely get completely torn into. But those are fun because I also made some changes to what it said in some of the book. I also just enjoy that because I enjoy those kinds of endings in my DCC adventures where it's like, hey, the magician's just going to use every point of spell run they can right now, and they are just going to give it their all, and we're going to see what happens. And so those are always fun, but I think that might have been a little bit in despite of this adventure. The adventure is just a maze, and it has some cool stuff. There's some weird orc things, but I don't think, looking back on it, have any real interest in running it again. Again, not a bad adventure, but I think I've changed my mind on this one quite a bit in the last year. So yeah, I'm going to leave it at C. That's it. So next is Shadow over Devil's Reef, and I'm going to leave this one at a B, I think. This one has some issues, like I mentioned in my review of it, that there is an issue with the puzzle that's near the end that makes no sense. John Hook himself even commented, the author of this book, commented on that video saying that, yeah, pretty much I agree with you on that. But I do think overall it is a really good adventure. It's essentially DCC's, Lovecraft's greatest hits. I think it's a fun one. I think there's a lot of fun stuff in it. And also, again, if you're a Lovecraft fan, I think you'll just enjoy this one a lot if you're both a DCC fan and a Lovecraft fan and you also like horror. It's very pulpy, and so I think you'll enjoy it. I will say, if you do watch my review of it, that was before I finally got my style down, so there is some weird green screen stuff in that one. But it's a solid review, so I recommend going and check it out whenever you want to. You're an adult. You have your own time schedule. You do it whenever you want. So that's going to stay at a B. The next one is Unholy Knights in Lankhmar. And this one's tough. It's either a B or a B+. So I did a review of this recently. It's probably like my most unhinged review, but I did really enjoy this, and I can't tell if I want to give it a B or a B+, because Unholy Knights in Lankhmar has a lot of really good stuff. It's a great introduction for people who want to get into investigation games, but they don't want to try a new system, like COC or Vaesen or whatever. So I do think it's good for that. There's a lot of great little tidbits of advice for people new to investigation games. I think I'm going to leave it as a B for now. I've now run it, I believe, 3 times, and there's a lot of stuff I like about it, and there's also some stuff, like, 'cause I'm not a huge Christmas guy, there's some other stuff I don't like about it, but I think overall it has the kind of, like, cynical Christmas stuff that I like. As somebody who loves the movie Krampus to watch every year around the holidays, this is, like, right up my alley in terms of just, like, cynical, mean-spirited, and holiday-themed. So I think I'll leave it as a B for now. Alright, next is the Fences Fortuitous Folly. I'm gonna be honest, it's been so long since I've run this, I don't really have an opinion on it. I'm gonna need to rerun this or reread it and get a good idea of it again. I'm gonna leave it as a B for now, but yeah, it's one you can run pretty easily, it's pretty short. I don't really have much to say about it, so I'm just gonna leave it as a B for now. That might change if I run it again, it might go up or down. I remember there being some fun stuff and some, like, kind of whatever stuff about it. Alright, Gang Lords of Lankhmar. This is a really solid one. I do think it has issues in terms of, I think you need to run this as part of a greater campaign, personally, and I would not say that about many, but I've tried to run this as part of just, like, a small campaign, like a small, like, 1 or 2 shot kind of game, and both times, it kind of went off the rails pretty fast, which isn't a problem. There's a lot of fun stuff. I love the intrigue between the different gangs. I love faction stuff. I think that's a very fun thing to do in RPGs. But I don't know how well it actually succeeds at that. I think it has a really good setup. I think it has a good setup for a neighborhood. And I think what you should do, I think you should just take it and run it how you want, because it might go off the rails immediately. So if players start fighting against the railguards you try putting down, I would say just let them break through and just roll with the punches is what I would say. I think this is a tough one to run if you really, really want to do just the story and you want to keep them, in their lane doing the thing they're supposed to be doing. I think you should just let players do whatever the hell they want in this one, because I do think players are going to get pretty excited about some of the things that are in here, and they might not want to follow the path you think they're going to follow. So I'm going to leave it as a B, because I do think that it's a really fun premise, and I think there's a lot of fun stuff in it, but I do think some newer GMs might get overwhelmed by it. I do think that it can go a little off the rails a little too easily. So I'm going to leave that at B for now. All right, next up is No Small Crimes in Lankhmar, and I think my opinion of this one has actually gone up since I reviewed this. I think this is a really fun little adventure. It's a great meat. It's the one that came with the Lankhmar box set when the box set originally came out. I don't know if it still comes out with the box set, if they have a new one in there, but this is a really fun one. It's not really spoilers because it happens pretty early on, but it's essentially, you know, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, but you're a bunch of sword and sorcery heroes and you have to go through a house, and there's some weird shit in it, and I do think it's just a really fun concept, and I think it's really creative. It makes the players have to sort of deal with, you know, normal things that are now much more difficult, as you can tell on the cover there. So I do think you should run this. I think you'd have a lot of fun with your group. I think it's very silly. I think it's a really fun one. It's pretty lighthearted. I mean, just the premise by itself is already lighthearted, but it's that lighthearted in RPGs where what makes it kind of funny is how fucking deadly it is. So I do recommend this one. I think I'm going to bump it up to a B+. All right, we're going to get to ones now that probably aren't going to change too much, but we'll go through them anyway. No Small Crimes in Lankhmar, absolutely fucking solid adventure. I think it's going to stay an A. It might be an A+. I did a review of this one, I believe, with 2 other Lankhmar adventures. I think they were Masks of Lankhmar and maybe Gang Lords of Lankhmar. I can't remember now, but I'll put it up in the top right there for you. But this is a fantastic one. It also has a great building that even if you don't want to use the adventure, you can just use the building as like a hideout or as a building in your city. I think the layout is perfect for that. So I think if you want to just take this and just strip out the story and just use what's there for your own reasons, for your own, you know, rival gang or for the player's hideout or, you know, just a business that they're going to hit for a heist, whatever it might be, I think this one's great for that. And the story itself is really, really good. But if you want to go more in depth, just watch the review. Intrigue at the Court of Chaos. Okay, so this one is a really solid one that I think I'd like to run again, because I had a lot of fun running this in the Pile of Shame campaign. This was the level 1 adventures. This is episode 2. I don't know if I got the satisfaction out of it that I could have with a different medium of running it. And what I mean by that is that, for anybody who hasn't watched the Pile of Shame campaign, that was meant to be a bit of like I don't mean to talk about it so much, but I just think it gives a lot of context for how I feel about some of the things I've run here. But the Pile of Shame campaign, what I was trying to do with that one, firstly, as the name suggests, try and cut down my Pile of Shame a little bit by going through a few adventures. But also what I was trying to do was, you know how like when you read like a Conan story or like a Fafhrd and Grey Master story or just any sort of, you know, pulp, sci-fi or adventure, fantasy, whatever, a lot of times, you know, you're not going directly between 2 stories. It's kind of just like you either start in media res or like you just start somewhere else. For example, all of the Chronicles of Conan are not in the right timeline. You know, you'll have King Conan, then you'll have Conan the Barbarian, and you'll just go back and forth to different ones in different parts of his life. And that's kind of what I wanted here, was that I didn't really want us with a bunch of downtime or the sort of campaign that just sort of goes from this adventure and then, okay, tomorrow we're doing this next adventure, but more like, oh, hey, between last adventure and this adventure, there's been a few weeks or a few months or even a few years. So what's happened since then? And then let's quickly just get into this. This is like, we're skipping all the like quote-unquote boring stuff, which I don't think is boring, but I think for what I was trying to do was like, we're going to get through all the fat, and we're going to do just good, solid adventure. Basically, with that framework, it meant that I was essentially only running these adventures as 1 to 2 shots, and I think the Court of Chaos really is harmed by that style. I think all the other ones are fine, but specifically this one, because of the actual Court of Chaos that you go to at the beginning of the game, I think that is a perfect on a silver platter place to give you ideas and missions and people and just all these different entities that should be repeat characters throughout a campaign. One of my biggest regrets is not using them more throughout the Pile of Shame campaign. That is my real pile of shame. Regardless of all that, I do think if you run this, I think you should run this as part of a greater campaign and just really let it breathe, really just enjoy it. If the players want to ask different weird, creepy creatures what's going on with them, what their deal is, if you want to throw in more little ideas of future missions or quests or intrigue or, you know, whatever it might be, I think this is a really solid one for that. I also think except for one, I think all the puzzles in this game are really good. And I think puzzles are really hard to do. Puzzles are extremely hard to do in RPGs in a way that I like, because most of the time, I found myself reading a puzzle going, okay, I kind of understand this. Actually, no, I do understand this. But how the fuck am I gonna make the players understand this without just telling them things? Like, just straight up telling them what the puzzle is, you know? And sometimes the solution to that is just telling them what the puzzle is. But I found with this, it was pretty easy just to put across the ideas. And except for one that was a little bit shaky, they all kind of got it pretty quickly and in a way that was satisfying and not like moon logic. So I think I'm actually gonna make Intrigue of the Core Chaos an A+, because I think it has a lot of potential that I personally don't think I took enough advantage of. And I think you should learn from my mistakes. So we're gonna put this one in A+, because I think a lot of people should play this one. It's not perfect. It's not perfect. Don't take it that way, but it has a lot of good stuff here. And even if you don't run it, fucking steal shit from it. So A+ you go. Okay, Sailors on the Starless Sea. I'm not going to go to this one too much. I mean, everybody's played this one, right, at this point? I mean, I don't know how much I need to really go over this one. It's solid, it's iconic, it is, like, the DCC adventure that everybody knows. I will probably do a deep dive video on it as, like, a milestone video, maybe, like, for, like, 5K subscribers or whatever. I usually have my patrons vote on stuff like that, and this was one of the options for the 1K subscriber thing, but they voted on an DCC actual play instead, so we did the Doom of the Savage Kings instead. But I'll probably do a deep dive on this at some point, so I'm not going to go too much into this, but I have a lot of things to say about this one, even though I think I'm probably kicking a dead horse, because who hasn't talked about this one, or run it, or whatever, you know, it's the most talked about DCC one. But I am going to put this one in A+. It's, again, not S. I think it has some issues, which I'll get into at a later date, but I think it's better than A. I think it's an A+, and I think it deserves to be there. So A+ you go. All right, A Conspiracy of Ravens. This is a really solid little horror game. It's probably going to stay in A for a few things, but this is a great one. It's sort of like a little village crawl. This is like, I think, one of the first reviews I did on the channel, actually. I guess I recommend going to check it out. I don't know if I really recommend anybody to watch my old stuff, if I'm being fully honest with you, but I do recommend this adventure. It's actually statted for if you want to run this as a funnel or level 1 game, which I think is brilliant and I think very helpful. I think as much as most people can do that by themselves, if you spend any time on Discords or on Reddit, you will see people asking what feel like very basic questions to you. So I do think there is an audience out there who would just like their funnels stat out for level 1s themselves. I do think if you are somebody who's running a funnel, you know what? Might not be the worst idea to try, you know, stick a finger in both. Where the fuck am I going with that? That's not an analogy. Wherever I was going with that, that's not at all where I want to go. But what I'm trying to say is that if you do want to maybe, I don't know, get bigger pools of people, doing a level 0 funnel, but also statting up for level 1 as well for people who want a leveled adventure, I think is a really good idea to try and get more people behind your game, because I know a lot of people who like DCC don't like the funnels, but they do like leveled play. And it also helps out people who are like, oh shit, I'm gonna grab this. I can run this as a funnel, or I could just run this as a leveled game for my group, and, you know, whatever they're feeling more is what we're going to do. So bing, bang, boom, there we go. So I'm going to leave it as an A, because it's a solid horror funnel. I love horror games, and I think this one really captures it well. It's honestly really dark in spots, and I will say, for all disclosure, I do know the author, and he's like one of the nicest guys I've met on the internet. And it is very funny that he's written this, because I'm just like, man, this is like, you are one of the nicest dudes, and I just don't know how you wrote this, because there's some fucked up shit in here, so it's very funny to me. But yeah, I'm gonna give this an A. All right, next we have another horror funnel, and I'll just put up the spoiler warning right now, because I do think that when I tell you what the premise of this is, it will sell it to a lot of people, but will also ruin the surprise to a lot of other people. So just skip to this time code if you don't want to be spoiled. I won't be very long, though. So basically the premise for this is that it's the movie Alien, but you're doing a funnel and you're on a boat. And that's pretty much it. You can, like I did for leveled play, turn it into Aliens, where you have multiple ones. It's a really fun premise. You will know immediately, I think, as players, that it's that, because I think like the name of the ship is like the Star of the Nostromo, or like the Eye of the Nostromo, something like that. Something along the lines of like where it's basically just called the Nostromo. It's a little messy. It could use some tightening up last time I played it, but I am a sucker for horror funnels, so I'm going to give it an A. All right, the next one we're doing is The Corpse That Love Built, and I also did a review on this, I think when I was still using green screen, so it's also another little weird one between me figuring out my styles. But I did a review on this one. I love this one. I think it's a fantastic horror adventure. It's by Stephen Noon, who also wrote They Drank Brandolyn Red, which we'll get to later, as for some of the new ones. But this is not a direct sequel, but takes place in the same world, has a lot of the same characters, same places, some few things like that, so there are some sequel things you could do, but the timelines of between the two from reading both of them don't necessarily line up perfectly, so you might need to change some details here and there. Overall, the vibe of this one is really good. It's like very like Universal monster movies kind of vibe. I can't say too much without it being spoilers, but I highly recommend this one if you are looking for a good spooky module. I absolutely recommend this one. You should definitely go for it. What's funny is that I reviewed this one around the same time that I reviewed Shadow over Devil's Reef, and this one actually has a really good final door puzzle that actually makes sense compared to the rest of the adventure. I will say it is very Resident Evil. It's a very like video gamey kind of puzzle, but I do think that works really well for RPGs. I think a lot of people should take more from video games than they have been, because I think there's a lot of great stuff in video games to use in RPGs. And yeah, I'm gonna give this one an A. All right, Hole in the Sky. Hole in the Sky is solid. I do like this one a lot. There's a lot of fun stuff with this one. It's another funnel. I do think, though, it's going to go down to a B+. I like it, but I do think... I can't get into too many spoilers on this one. I did, again, this is the first Pile of Shame episode, so you can watch me run it, and you can also watch me review it, but I liked it a lot. I think I like it less now. I'm not sure why. It's, again, still a B+. It's still highly up there for recommendations for what you should get. If you're looking for a good zany gonzo funnel, I think this one's really good, but when comparing it to everything else I'm looking at, I do think it's going to be a B+. I can't say anything like getting spoilers, so I won't go too much into it. You can watch the review if you want to get more spoilers on it, but I do recommend it, but I don't think it's an A in my mind anymore. All right, the last of the A's, we are going into Chaos Rising. I think Chaos Rising is going to stay at A, and the reason why it's going to stay at A is because this is, I believe, 5 adventures, maybe 6, but I think 5. And though they do vary in quality, some are pretty good, some are kind of whatever, the fact that you can get all 5 of them for a really good price, it's going to stay at A for that alone. You have some really good content, some really good quality stuff here for a pretty cheap price, you know, as long as you live in America and don't have hellish shipping. So it's going to stay at A. I don't really have much to say about it because I'll probably end up running through all of them at some point and then just, I don't know, doing a whole Chaos Rising review. And maybe I'll rank like the 5 adventures in there. But it's going to stay at A because this is like one of the first ones I recommend to anybody. If you're getting a DCC and you're like, man, I don't have this much money. I can buy the core book and I can buy this, but I don't really have that much money to spend on a bunch of adventures. Grab this. You'll get 5 for, I think, like $20. It might have gone up now. I don't know. But for the price you get for how much you get, I think it's totally worth it. So you're going to stay at A. All right, let's get into S. So Portal Under the Stars is going to stay at S tier, obviously. For me, it is the quintessential funnel. I do think that Sailors has some more, I guess, interesting stuff in it, but I cannot stress enough how much Portal is just a really, really fantastic game for a first time. I think when you look at it on the page, you might go, oh, this is very puzzle heavy, or it doesn't have the stuff I like, or maybe it's whatever. Other than the first door, it's just really solid. It's really fast. If you're new to DCC, you can absolutely run this in a one-shot. Sailors, not so much. Can be tough. I've had people comment in the last one be like, I had no trouble running Sailors in a one-shot. As if, like, I don't know, no other people exist that might have trouble, but I don't know. Good for you. But a lot of people have said they have trouble running Sailors in a one-shot when you're new to DCC. So I do think, like I said, I like funnels in a single shot. I can run Sailors now in a 3 to 4 hour slot. I can really keep things moving. But Portal, you do not need to be an experienced GM or a DCC GM or player to get this down into a one-shot. I think it's solid, and I think more people should run it. And it comes with the core book, so it's fucking free with your main book. So seriously, if you're looking at what to run first for DCC, I can't stress enough. Go with Portal, just as a one-shot, and then if you want to do a campaign, Sailors is great to kick off a campaign. I think Portal is also a solid one to start off a campaign in, but in case you're just trying to get the ropes down, then just run it by itself, and then run something else to start off a campaign. That's what I would recommend. Moon Slaves of Cannibal Kingdom, like I said last year, you got Big Monkey on your cover, you're getting an S. That's it. Argue with the wall, I don't care. So next we're going to the Rats of Illthmar. This one I have run a long time ago, so I'm sort of forgetting a lot of it. I remember really enjoying it. I remember having a really good group for it. The layout of the map and the idea of infiltrating Cult's temple is just a really fun one. Like, it's laid out properly like a temple that's actually, has people running around in it, doing stuff, doing different rituals and, whatever duties they have and that sort of thing, which I think is really great, because a lot of times when you're, going into a cult temple, it's usually one that's like in disarray, or it's actually like a thing that was used by a prior species or civilization or whatever, and it's been sort of like retrofitted into a temple. But this is just a straight up temple that you go through. I think it has a lot of fun stuff in it for that. I think, I'll be honest, S seems a little high for it, but I do remember really loving it. I don't remember enough about it to really give it a proper score. I'm going to leave it at S for now, because I think if I gave it S, I gave it S for a reason. There's a very good chance if I read it again between now and the next tier list review, it will probably be an A+, but I'm going to leave it at S for now because I really did enjoy it. But yeah, okay, next one. Acting Up In Lankhmar. Alright, so Acting Up In Lankhmar is my favorite DCC adventure. I'm, again, going to do this for a milestone, probably like 10k subscribers, something like that. We'll see. But this is absolutely S tier. It's my favorite one. I have run it several times now. Every time has gone amazing. I'm not going to say too much about this because I'm going to save it for, like I said, a milestone video. But I will say, if you do run this, the map that's in there of the theater, draw it out. If you're online, draw it out. If you're in person, draw it out. Have those blueprints ready for your players. Trust me, it will make the game a bajillion times better. The players will have an absolute field day. It's such a creative game. It's so much fun. If you like RP and you like working with the rest of your group, because I do know some people just come in to play and show off their cool character, but if you actually do enjoy really, working together as a cohesive group to keep things locked down, you're gonna love Acting Up In Lankhmar. Alright, next is Masks of Lankhmar, and this one's also going to stay at S. This one is such an absolutely fantastic Lankhmar module. It is so good. It's brutal as fuck. This is the kind of brutality I do like. Like, Jewels of the Carnifex feels too much for brutality's sake. This feels like brutal because the story you're in, the world you're in is brutal, and it's reinforcing that. It's not doing it just to kick you in the pants just because. It also has one of the best openings to an adventure I've ever run. I will go into spoilers real quick just to explain it, but I think once I explain it, you're going to want to play this one. So skip to this time code if you don't want to hear spoilers. Basically, the players start in the basement of a big mansion. There's a big party of like nobles and rich people going on above them. There's a vault they're trying to break into, and they all got there individually, and they all kind of like, Spider-Man meme each other, kind of just pointing like, hey, what the hell, what are you doing here? And once they do that, some guards come in and break through the door, and they have to fight them off and basically work together, so it sort of forces the group together. I did review this with the 3 Lankhmar modules I did, so I will go more in depth there, but it is awesome because you also have this part where the players can sort of say how they got down in the basement. Did they use disguise? Did they use their charms and wiles? Did they, give some money to the doorman to get in? Did they bend some bars and break through? What did they do? Like, what little things does it say about your character that got you into this basement? All right, that is the new rankings for all the ones we did last year. And now we'll get to the new ones. Like I said, I've only actually run 8 different games that were made for DCC this year. A lot of the DCC I did was homebrew stuff or for different OSR modules or, things that just weren't made for DCC. So I was actually surprised how few had actually run that were made for DCC. I mean, Crypt the Devil Lich here kind of makes sense with how big it was that it kind of took up several sessions of my time before, that whole screw up. But there's a few videos I've already done on that one. We'll get into this one when we get to it. But let's kick it off with Doom of the Savage Kings. Now, Doom of the Savage Kings. I ran this once as a test before I did it for the AP. I will say that both times I did get screwed by different things. The first time I ran it was not very good practice like I was hoping it would be because the players immediately went psycho and decided they were either going to kill the Jarl's advisor or they were going to run north after the beast. This is not really spoilers because this happened so early on. Like it's not spoiling anything. And also, if you see the cover, you see the cover. This is not spoilers. And to be fair, it was a really fun game. It was stupid. It was just chaotic people were just, I guess, in a mood to just be chaotic that time, but it wasn't very good practice for the game itself, unfortunately for me. So the players ended up essentially just going north after the creature that they can't track at all, not knowing where it's going or what is in the north, and basically just getting themselves killed. And so that wasn't great practice. It was fun, but not great. And then for the actual play, which is one of the biggest piss-offs ever, was that there's a bunch of family stuff going on. And so I had to drive for 5 hours across the island that I live on to get back to my home. And as soon as I got back in my seat, I basically hit record right away. So I was absolutely exhausted for the AP. It was extremely hard to actually be as creative and as fun as I want to be. But because of time constraints, we couldn't really push it back. So that just ended up being the AP. I still think the AP turned out pretty well, but it was unfortunate that for the milestone AP that it was from such a tired level. So I just wanted to give that context in terms of why my review might be lower this than what other people might have. I think this game has a really, really well-designed hometown. It has a very intriguing mountainous area that has a sort of darkness and grit to it. And honestly, I think it might be one of the better DCC adventures to kick off a campaign with, or at least have your campaign centered around the town of Herat. Because I think it's really fleshed out for you. There's a map right there for you. You have it all covered. If you use the Foundry module that was made for it like I did, it's all made for you. It's beautiful. It's perfect. So it's really good for that stuff. For the story itself, I think it also has a lot of fun stuff in it. It's pretty brutal. It has some fun intrigue, some good RP that you can have in town. There are some somewhat faction play, not huge factions, but you have the witch with her agenda, you have the Yddgrrl with his, the advisor, a few different people like the innkeeper. So there's some solid conflict that can come from that. I'm going to give it an A+ for now, because I think I'd like to give it an S tier because I think it's so good, but I think I need a group that doesn't completely turn the story on its head and not actually deal with any of the content at all. And also, I'd like to run it that's not for a show where I'm deathly tired and also trying to be entertaining. So I'm going to put it in A+ for now. All right, so the next one we have is Shadow of the Beakmen, and this is one I go back and forth on. Some days it's an S, other days it's an A+. And I think the only reason for that is the opening. Once again, not to keep plugging, I did a review on this. I do go in depth as to what I mean by that a lot more. But essentially, the opening is a little bit rough. I think it's a really, really cool opening. It's just immediate res, immediately going into this cataclysm that's happening. But I do think it has a problem of potentially going not the way they want. Either players could die pretty easily just by some pretty rough rolls, or they might just have trouble knowing what they should do. I could even see some players who, might not even necessarily be doing a bad job, because in the game that's so deadly, they might go, fuck this. Let's just run away. Obviously, I think most players should know, hey, this is kind of what the story is. You might want to help these people out or just get to whatever. But the actual dungeon crawl itself, the entire premise itself, was so good. It was so fun. I had an amazing ending, which I talk about in the review, so I'm not going to spoil it here. But the ending we had was one of the most insane, absolutely insane DCC endings I've had in one of these adventures. Now, that was because of wizards. Obviously, it wasn't the module itself, but the module itself mixed with this made for probably one of the most memorable games I've ever had running this system. So I'm going to put it as an A+ for now, but next year it might be an S. If I run it again, I think for a third time, I want to say, then we'll see if I think it's worth more than that. But either way, seriously, if you can get this module, get it. It's so good. A+ you go. All right, Crypt of the Devil Lich. All right. Oh boy, this is a tough one. It's very funny to me because what I think you should do, and just because I think it should be funny to see the difference in energy levels. You should watch my first impressions of Crypt of the Devil Lich back to back with the post-mortem. So what was gonna happen was I was gonna have a highly edited actual play campaign of Crypt of the Devil Lich, but the thing I forgot is that I'm a goddamn moron who recorded everybody else's audio, but not my own. Turns out, pretty important for the GM to be able to be heard. But anyway, this game has a lot of issues. It has a lot of great stuff in it. It is very hard for me to put it where I want to put it because in some ways, it's a B. In other ways, it's a fucking D. Like, it's got some rough stuff in there. We go over it. I don't think I'm as bitter as some of my players were. Some of my players, I think, got a little spicy. We all got pretty snarky in the postmortem, but I don't know if it's wholly undeserved. And one thing I'm going to address now, because I had some comments about, it's actually 3.5 with our... I'm telling you, when I read through it, I realized that Crypt of the Devil Lich was originally a 3.5 adventure, but I'm telling you, the stuff that's in here in the DCC version is not from 3.5. It is from the 5e version that they made first, and then converted to DCC. I'm telling you, just like, if you get the book yourself, you'll see what I mean. It is not 3.5, trust me. And that's one of the biggest issues, is that this is a product made by Beakmen Games, and it feels like DCC was not an afterthought. There obviously a lot of work went into this, a lot of work went into all of this, but there's a lot of typos, there's information straight up missing, there is stuff there that is so clearly for the 5e version of the book, not the DCC version, and stuff like that is just weirdly insulting. It took forever to get the book in our hands in the first place, and then when I got it, I have what feels like an incomplete product. And I'll be honest, even if this gets like a second printing where they fix all that, remove the 5e stuff that should be, in DCC terms, not 5e terms, then convert to DCC, and, the typos and whatever is missing, whatever else, I still don't know how great of an adventure this is going to be. And I know it's trying to be this brutal, horrible dungeon like Tomb of Horrors, and that's what it's harkening back to. And I realize it seems weird to be like, this game that's meant to be really hard and brutal is too brutal and hard. I get that, but it's just one of those things where, unfortunately, I just don't think I really enjoy those games that much. I think I do for a funnel. I think I do for, Morkborg or, even Trophy Dark, where you have this sort of story about your character and where you go. But for a 7th level DCC game, fun in some ways, but it feels like your dick is just getting ripped off in every room. And I think that's fun to an extent, but it starts to really lose its luster pretty fast. I think if it was more laid out to be sort of the same way you should lay out a horror movie or an action movie. You don't want all action or all horror. You need rising tension, you need the fall after, because what makes things scary or fun or interesting is firstly moving the story forward, but also giving you a break. Otherwise, your brain just starts to become really immune to it and just stops really reacting to it that much. So the players, sure, every room they went into, they're like, okay, how is this room going to totally ruin my life? As much as they were doing that with every room, I don't think it was that much fun by the end of it, because we did the first level before they all got TPK'd, and there was a lot of fun moments in that. I think we all had fun with it, but it was one of those things where it's like, if this was more divided into really rough rooms and then, normal rooms, really rough rooms, normal rooms, I think it would have had a greater impact. It would also have more tension for the players because they don't actually know. There was one room like that on the first level, essentially, but outside of that room, like, everything else was just trying to rip their dick off, and that's it. And so I think that kind of fun kind of stopped being as fun. And on the GM side, this really showed that the DCC style layout really, really does not work on a bigger scale. For the adventures that are, just like 30 to 50 pages, totally fine. I have issues with it, but I think it works. For a book this big, where you have rooms that, I kid you not, go on for like 4 pages, it's too much. You need to break it down. You need to make it more like OSC. You need to make it more bullet point. I don't know what you need to do, but the normal DCC style does not work on this scale at all for this complexity of game. So it was kind of rough as a GM for that alone, not even including the typos and the actual information missing. There's straight up a magic item that's just not there. It mentions that's there, and then it doesn't say where it is in the book. It doesn't appear anywhere in the book. It's just this random item that has no appendix on it at all. So I don't know, it's weird. And I think because of that, I find it hard to recommend. I think there's a lot of stuff, if you want to buy it, just rip things out of it. If you want to buy it, just do the 2 and 4 things where it's like, hey guys, listen, we're not going to have that much fun, but we're going to do this gauntlet because the fun part is doing the gauntlet and, just getting totally demolished. And if you want to do that for several sessions on end, then go for this. I think that stuff is fun for 1 to 2 sessions, but I think by the 4th session, it gets a little tiring for me personally, and it's not really what I'm looking for, is what I found with this. I can't stress enough, I still really like brutal, hard, mean dungeons. I like mean-spirited stuff. I think it just has to be done correctly. It's literally just a style that I think you can do right and you can do wrong, and I think Crypt Devil Lich does it wrong. So, you know what? I'm going to be pretty fucking mean here. I'm going to give Crypt Devil Lich a D+. There you go, bud. If you want to buy this to get your dick ripped off, go for it. If you want to buy it for all the different traps, cool monsters, and really high tier stuff, it's also really good for that. That's basically the capacity I would recommend it in. So with it being so rushed and feeling so 5e forward and not DCC forward, I have this bitter taste in my mouth. And I think that's why it's going to stay in D+ for now. Mysteries of the Multiverse. So I did a review on the zine, but this is for MCC. However, I did run the adventure that is found in the zine with DCC, and I really enjoyed it. It was very gonzo. It was very wacky. It felt very like Fallout 2, and I think anything that gives me Fallout 2 vibes is going to get some pretty good points on it. It was really fun having essentially like these tribal sword and sorcery heroes go out to what is like an old world thing that everybody would recognize. It does have that, 50s vibe. I really think if you want to run a Fallout game, I would grab this. I mean, for the stuff in the zine itself that is really helpful, really useful, stuff I would probably use even in other games for like post-apocalypse stuff. The adventure itself is very Fallout 2. It's not very Fallout 1. It's a little bit more, like I said, gonzo, a little bit sillier. It's not like silly, but it is a little bit sillier and has a little bit more fun with it. So if you are looking to run a bit more of like a Fallout 2 or even, I guess, Fallout 3 or Fallout New Vegas kind of games, I think this is a good one to pick up just for the adventure itself and just to run it and reflavor it to whatever works in your Fallout-inspired world. So I think with that, I'm going to give it a B. I think it has some solid stuff. I think the zine itself that has stuff outside the adventure is also worth buying. The reason why it's a B is that, it didn't change the way I saw things. It is a really good solid one I recommend. But yeah, I think B is a good level for it. All right, next they drank Brandolyn Red. So this is a funnel written by Stephen Newton that is basically the precursor to the Corpse That Love built up here. This one's solid. I didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed the Corpse That Love built. I think it's still solid. I found that some of the descriptions were going for like this, I guess, kind of like disgusting, not even body horror, but just like the disgust part of horror, which just doesn't really work for me. It's not really what I'm interested in. I don't think it's bad. It just can come off a little bit edgy at times, which will work for some people. Didn't really work for me. It's another horror funnel, so I think that is pretty solid, but I will say, unfortunately, it's probably the weaker of the horror funnels that I've read. Some different stuff with rumors and clans the players are a part of, and I think those little small pepperings of background and lore will help players, jump off with some ideas for who the characters are, who they might become, and so I think there's some cool stuff to do with that. And so I'm going to give this one a B. All right, next is the Emerald Enchanter, and this is kind of funny. Between Emerald Enchanter and Bloom of the Bloodguard, which is the next one I'm going to do, these ones are hard for me to rank because both of them have kind of the same built-in thing that happened that makes it hard to review. And what that thing is that there's essentially a thing in both where, like, in the third or second room, you can basically skip the entire dungeon and just go to the end, which happened in both of these adventures. So I do really need to run them again. Emerald Enchanter was a blast. It was a great group. Basically, I made them part of like a mercenary company that was searching for their missing families when they came back from like a war or like their last, mission or whatever else. Highly recommend making DCC mercenary companies. I think my players had a load of fun with that. Basically, what I did was I made them all a single leveled character, and then they each had 2 level 0s that were like, both indirectly under their command and directly under, their command in terms of like they would tell their little hirelings what to do. They were all greenhorns joining this mercenary company, and the leveled players were like the officers and, different parts of the mercenary company. There's a lot of fun stuff with that aspect. It did mean there's a lot of inter-party RP, so I'm actually kind of happy that the Emerald Enchanter has this like quick get to the end button essentially in the second room, because by room 1 we were 3 hours in because of how much people were just having fun and talking. So the group itself was amazing, but I didn't actually see that much of the dungeon, so it feels hard to actually rate this properly. But from what I did see, there's a lot of really cool stuff in there. There's also a Foundry VTT module for it, which made it a lot easier to run, even though, again, we skipped a lot of it. But from what I saw, I think there's a lot of fun stuff in it, so I'm going to give it a B+ for now. That might change when I run it wholly, because I might, next time I run it, might remove that immediate get to the end button that's there. Because I think it's a pretty easy one to shift. I'll probably review this at some point where I'll actually give examples of what I would do for people who want to remove that, but still keep the encounter that is a part of this. But that will be for a later date. So we're going to go B+ for this one. All right, next, Bloom of the Blood Garden is perhaps one of the most creative funnels I've seen. If you're a GM who likes running a lot of the same things, but you might also get tired with certain games, grab Bloom of the Blood Garden, because this is essentially a funnel with a shitload of choice. And choice mostly in where players can go. The first room essentially has 2 areas that split off, and then from there, those split off, and then they split off more, and then you go into the sort of final dungeon where they split off in more different ways. So there's a lot to explore, and I'll try and keep this from spoilers, but same as the Emerald Enchanter, my players basically went into one of the first rooms and then were able to get to essentially the last room. I love the creativity, I love the art, I love the encounters. I think there's a lot of fun stuff here. I do need to run it again to get a better idea of it before I do a proper review on it. So I think I'm also going to put this one in, oh man, A or B+? What do you guys think, huh? I don't know if it's A. I'm going to put this one in B+ as well, because I think there's a lot of fun stuff. I think, like the Emerald Enchanter, it's a B+ because of the potential I see. I don't know how to actually run some play fully because of how much we skipped. So I'll leave this as to be determined at a later point, but for now I'm going to put it in B+ because I had a lot of fun with it, and I think it was a really cool adventure. All right, and the last one for the video, this is the Blood Rose Curse, and this is in a book that has 2 adventures. The first one being this like creepy Winnie the Pooh adventure. I didn't get to run that one yet. I do want to. It has a lot of cool stuff in it, but I just haven't got around to it yet. This one was really fun. This is essentially a Beauty and the Beast story, and it has an interesting mix of stuff from Elfland. It has some really interesting creepy horror stuff. I think it is a really interesting look at a retelling of Beauty and the Beast through the lens of DCC. Now, obviously, it changes a lot and comes up with its own stuff, but it's the vibe it goes for that it absolutely nails, in my opinion. So if you want a bit more of, I would say, like, I guess, like a gothic horror with a big mansion and some creepy stuff happening, you can absolutely take this, and also you could probably just take it for the mansion map itself, which is great. You could probably replace the beast if you want to make this more about like an actual vampire or something else, if you want to change the story completely. But there is a crapload of fun stuff to be found here, and I think it really nails what's going for. So I'm going to give this one a B, I think. A B purely because I think it nails what's going for. I think it does a really good job of it, but it's not like one of my favorite adventures I ran. Of all the ones we're showing here, it's not up there in terms of like, S or A+. I just had a lot of fun with it. I think it's solid, and I think people should grab this. Plus, you get it with another adventure, so that's great. All right, guys, that is the entirety of the DCC Adventure tier list for 2023. I will see how much I have for next year, because I don't know how much I'm going to run of DCC. Hopefully a lot. I got a bunch of stuff recently, a bunch of horror modules and other stuff. And, just as some closing remarks, thank you to everybody, obviously my patrons, for supporting me and all the things you do. I mean, it keeps me going. But also thank you to everybody else for making 2023, a great year, at least YouTube-wise for me. I've been meeting a lot of great people. It's been really nice, playing with more people and writing new things and trying out stuff, and just a lot of great wholesome stuff this year, and I hope that continues into 2024. I know we are all going into very dark times right now, so hopefully we all make it through. That was a much bummer ending than I want to end on. But basically, it's the end of 2023, and I look hopeful into 2024 to really step my game up with some of the stuff I'm doing. I'm working right now on some stuff that will probably not be out for many months to come. Probably not till like the summer of 2024 or even later. But there's going to be some really great stuff in the future, and I hope you guys enjoy it. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the ranking video. It's all pretty silly stuff. I wouldn't take it too seriously. But have yourselves a good one, and stay safe out there.